By now in this conference, the story of the Mormon Battalion is well known to this audience. As has been detailed elsewhere, the battalion's enlistment and purpose was to secure California for the United States, proving that they could open a road whereon wagons could travel from Santa Fe to Alta California. It became evident to the Mexican government that the United States could equip and maintain an army in the field in the border areas claimed by both nations, thereby securing vast lands for the expanding nation. 335 of the original 500 Mormon Battalion soldiers who left Fort Leavenworth, Iowa, on 13 August 1846, arrived at the Mission San Luis Rey in what is now Oceanside, California, on 27 January 1847. They were accompanied by 5 women and 1 child. The battalion left the next day for the seaport of San Diego, arriving 2 days later on 29 January. That evening, Lieutenant Colonel Philip St. George Cook reported to Stephen W. Kearny that a wagon road, quote, of great value to our country, end quote, had been opened to the Pacific Ocean. Since hostilities appeared to be over, General Kearny was waiting for a ship to go to Monterey, the U.S. Army of the West headquarters. On February 1st, the battalion marched back to the Mission San Luis Rey, which was their headquarters until March 15, when Companies A, C, D, and E left for Los Angeles and Company B for San Diego, where they would remain until the 9th of July before joining the rest of the battalion in Los Angeles. To say the military situation of the U.S. Army in California was fluid may be an understatement. For several months, Stockton, Fremont, and Kearny bickered over who was the supreme American authority in California. A quote from Colonel Cook is illuminating, quote, General Kearny is supreme somewhere up the coast. Colonel Fremont supreme in the Pueblo de Los Angeles. Commodore Stockton is commander-in-chief in San Diego. Commodore Shubrick the same in Monterey, and I at San Luis Rey. And we are all supremely poor. The government having no money and no credit, we hold the territory because Mexico is the poorest of all, end quote. Before Company B arrived, San Diego had changed hands several times. Captain Samuel F. DuPont of the U.S. sloop of war Kane in July 1846 captured the Mexican fort and renamed it Fort DuPont. After DuPont and his Marines sailed away, the Californios recovered the position and held it until Commodore Robert Stockton came on October 31st in the U.S. frigate Congress. He landed about 100 Marines, recaptured the fort, and named it after himself. After Company B arrived, Stockton, his Marines, and sailors, numbering between 200 and 300 men, boarded their ship. On March 22nd, the flagship of the U.S. Navy's Pacific Squadron, the USS Savannah, arrived in San Diego Harbor. The frigate rated 44 guns, displaced 1,726 tons, and carried a full complement of 480. When she fired her guns, said Azariah Smith, it made the air ring. The Navy aboard the Savannah sailed away on March 26th. When Company B arrived in San Diego, the Missouri Dragoons, who had been garrisoned there, were marched to the Mission San Luis Rey, where they were ordered to stay so that the other 4 battalion companies could go to Los Angeles. So Captain Jesse B. Hunter, a Mormon officer elected by his men in Council Bluffs, became the ranking military officer, and Company B the occupying military force. The nearly 4 months Company B was stationed in San Diego will be the focus of the balance of my presentation. An interesting question is, how did the Mormon Battalion soldiers appear to the citizens of the Pueblo of San Diego? The battalion had left Tucson facing a 90-day march with only 60 days of rations, much of which was lost in an accident on the Gila River. Their clothes were threadbare and many were without shoes. Nathaniel Jones reported, "We now find ourselves without clothes and worn down with fatigue. For 30 days we have nothing but beef and not enough to go around all the time." Dr. John S. Griffin, assistant surgeon of General Kearny's Dragoons, was not impressed by the appearance of the battalion. He reported, "They are barefooted and almost naked." Unfortunately, the battalion members were unable to buy clothing until they reached Los Angeles, so they tried to make do. Henry Standage reported that I washed my shirt and a pair of pants, which I had made out of an old wagon cover, all the clothing I had. The physical condition of the Company B members had not improved a great deal in the 6 weeks between the time they arrived in California and were stationed in San Diego. Many of the soldiers had lost up to 40% of their body weight on the march due to insufficient rations and physical exertion. When Company B arrived at San Diego on March 17th, the men dug until late at night trying to find water. They were so emaciated and dehydrated, eating was a serious problem when they first arrived. Daniel Bennett put grains of sugar on his tongue while sipping small amounts of water until his stomach could tolerate food. On March 27th, Azariah Smith and several men were invited to pay a visit on the Congress before it sailed to Monterey. The crew was sociable and showed them different areas of the ship and gave them a few potatoes. 2 days later, Azariah and his father went to the ocean to bathe and collected mussels and oysters for supper. Azariah boiled his potatoes, the first he had tasted since leaving Fort Leavenworth. Company B's diet steadily improved as they were able to get fish, mussels, clams, and oysters from the ocean and purchase food from the local citizens with money earned from their civic construction projects. On March 31st, 2 wagons arrived from Los Angeles with groceries. On April 8th, the ship Barnstable arrived from San Francisco bringing 40 barrels of flour and a letter from Colonel Cook telling Captain Hunter to resume full rations of flour and 1.5 pounds of beef per day per soldiers. While I don't find it in their journals, I imagine the soldiers came to enjoy rice, beans, tortillas, enchiladas, etc. as much as we do. A day gladly noted among the journals was when the Army paymaster finally caught up with Company B on May 4th. They had been due 6 months' pay in January. Samuel Rogers wrote, "The members of our company are drawing their pay for 6 months, deducting what they owe to the settlers. I drew $40.50, sutlers, I meant to say. I drew $40.50, having had $1.55 paid the seller. I paid Ephraim Green 50 cents for the half soles and John Lawson $12.85 and took a receipt in full for all demands. Paid Thomas Kirk for the shoes which I had of him. I am now clear of debt with $24.85. Dr. John S. Griffin said, "The Mormons, after their payment, took a little spree. Some few men drunk and 1 or 2 black eyes, or small fights occurred, but much less drinking occurred among them than I have ever witnessed among any troops after a payment." I guess that's the second-hand compliment. A second question may be, how did the Pueblo of Los Angeles appear to the soldiers of Company B? I'm sorry, San Diego, guys, my brain. The Pueblo of San Diego, of which Company B was now the occupying military force, was situated about 4 miles from the harbor. It was the only port south of San Francisco. The Pueblo de Los Angeles had not yet developed a harbor at San Pedro. They initially camped on a flat below the old mission, also several miles from the town. A census was taken by the Army, which showed that the population consisted of, quote, 248 white persons, 3 Negroes, 483 tame Indians, and 1,550 untamed Indians. One wonders how they counted the untamed Indians. The Mexican citizens appear to have been counted with the white persons. This is before the battalion arrived, obviously. The town itself was located in today's Old Town. A contemporary photograph shows a church and about 24 buildings, mostly concentrated around the plaza. While the town appears modest and dusty, the Bandini home and others like the Estudillo home were large and well appointed. San Diego was surrounded by ranchos, large and small. On fiesta days, the town was full of people coming from the surrounding ranchos, where they sat on the verandas of the great houses and gathered around the plaza to witness bullfights and dances. On the occasion of a bullfight, barriers were thrown up around the plaza and bleachers were built in convenient places for people to view the temporary bull ring. San Diego's leading citizen, Don Juan Bandini, was an invaluable friend to the Americans. He decided in 1846 to support the American occupation and transfer of territory from Mexico to the United States. Had Mexico won the war, he likely would have been executed as a traitor. He had three famously beautiful daughters, Josefa, Isabel, and Arcadia, who sewed one of the first American flags flown in San Diego. The demand for American flags exceeded the supply after the war, so the Bandini sisters sewed one made of red, white, and blue flannel and white muslin. General Kearny's headquarters had occupied the Bandini house on the plaza. Shortly after their arrival, Company B officially moved the Army encampment from the Mission San Diego de Alcalá to Fort Stockton, overlooking the town. This enabled them to better defend the town, and the increased proximity allowed for more time for civic projects and to reconstruct and enlarge the fort. I want to explain here about the prejudice the Mormon Battalion encountered in San Diego. A portion of the 2,400 troops of the U.S. Army of the West were the 2nd Missouri Mounted Volunteer Regiment. Some of these men had been involved in the Mormon War in Missouri in 1838, when the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints were persecuted and driven from the state under an extermination order by the governor. While stationed in San Diego before the battalion arrived, the Missourians spread tales among the citizens of San Diego, alarming them with rumors that the Mormons would despoil their town, rape their women, and steal their cattle. Precisely what the Missourians had done to the Mormons in Missouri when they were driven out by the vigilante mobs. Dr. John S. Griffin, previously quoted, was 31, a U.S. Army surgeon who came to California with Kearny and now directed the hospital in San Diego. He wrote, "The prejudice against the Mormons here seems to be wearing off. It is yet among the Californians a great term of reproach to be called a Mormon, yet as they are a quiet, industrious, sober, inoffensive people, they seem to be gradually working their way up. They are extremely industrious. They have been engaged while here in digging wells, plastering houses, and seem anxious and ready to work. The Californians have no great opinion of their soldier-like qualities, and in action will not dread them much, this arising in a great measure from their dress, carriage, etc., which is unlike any soldier as anything could possibly be. Yet, I think if brought into action, they could prove themselves good men, as I am told they are generally fine shots, and they drill tolerably well." What did Company B do to befriend and eventually endear themselves to the San Diegans, and what were soldiers doing plastering walls, firing bricks, and digging wells? There were daily military drills, but not much else to help the soldiers occupy their time. So Captain Hunter gave them permission to work for pay for the citizens of San Diego. While they didn't wear yellow t-shirts, the soldiers of Company B embarked on a large-scale Mormon Helping Hands, albeit paid, project. The first task undertaken was to whitewash almost every building in the town. As an act of beautifying the town, it was a great success. Don Juan Bandini hired the soldiers to build a brickyard just east of his property and a kiln to dry the bricks, a great improvement on the adobe bricks used in most of the building. Some 40,000 bricks were made at the brickyard, which were used for construction of public buildings, sidewalks, chimneys, and lining wells. Carpenters finished the insides of several houses. Company B soldier John Lawson opened a blacksmith shop. George Taggart, a tannery, and an oven for cooking bread and meat was built. Captain Hunter produced adobes for a wall, the jail, and a corral at $20 per thousand. All of these things won the friendship of the residents, but the thing that impressed the native San Diegans most was the wells Company B dug. It was apparent from the onset of the occupation that there was a shortage of water, fresh water in the area, and in dry spells the town was often without water, except from shallow wells only about a foot deep, located several miles away. Many previous attempts to increase the production of water by digging wells in the town had failed. The battalion members dug some 20 new wells that were 30 feet deep and lined them with fired bricks from the brickyard. They built windlasses to bring the buckets of water to the surface. After Ira J. Willis rigged the first windlass and bucket, the residents were astounded. As soon as breakfast was over, the native men went to the well and sat around smoking their cigaritos while one of their party kept drawing up a bucket of water over and over again. Bringing a secure, consistent water supply to the town benefited the citizens of San Diego more than any other civic project. The combination of fired brick as a replacement for adobe and readily available potable water, all thanks to Company B, allowed San Diego to flourish after 1847 as it had not done before. Another need in San Diego was the lack of public buildings in which to conduct official business, the only such building being the United States Military Depot, which was unsuitable for most meetings. The battalion members contracted to build a two-room brick building, which was planned as a schoolhouse. During its construction, however, the plans were amended to the use of the building as a courthouse, which it was thereafter known as. The courthouse was used to house both the town and county courts, for land sales by the town sheriff, for the first Episcopal religious services, for the first meeting of the San Diego Masonic Lodge, for the office of the first mayor of San Diego, for a jail, and for a stable until it was finally destroyed by fire. A reconstruction of the courthouse sits on the plaza today. As local government was transitioning from Mexican law to American law, the local legislative council, composed of Don Juan Bandini, Harry Fitch, and others, chose Company B member Samuel Miles to lead the council in the preparation of written laws. At the request of the alcalde, the mayor, Miles helped in keeping his records and making out his reports. He also helped with administering the American law at the Mexican alcalde's request. Because of his involvement with the citizens through his office as assistant commissary and assistant quartermaster, Lieutenant Robert Clift was briefly appointed as the acting alcalde. Battalion members were also invited to weddings and funerals. There is an experience that is remarked on in the journals and seemed to have affected every soldier: the tragic story of 23-year-old Lydia Hunter. Lydia and the commanding officer, Jesse D. Hunter, had been married for 15 months, and she had been pregnant from Fort Leavenworth all the way to California. I cannot imagine the stamina of a woman pregnant for the entire march. Lydia died on April 26, just 2 weeks after giving birth to a son named Diego. One of only 5 women who completed the journey from Fort Leavenworth to California, she was considered, quote, a most estimable lady by members of the battalion. From the journal entries, she appears to have been universally loved. Dr. Griffin wrote, "Last night, the wife of Captain Hunter died of typhoid fever, or rather, I think, a malignant form of quotidian fever." Quotidian fever was a name they gave something that didn't know what it was. The attack was issued in with severe rigors some 6 days ago, with great difficulty of breathing and oppression, followed by high fever. 11 each day, the same attack came with cramps and irregular nervous twitchings, serious diarrhea, mind affected, purgative of calomel. Her breasts became inflamed and before death suppurated. The nervous twitching were stopped by the use of small doses of morphine and asafoetida. The chill checked by quinine. Her brain became very much excited, delirium for 2 days previous to her death, and deafness. She finally died last night about 10 p.m. in great pain. This was the first American woman who ever bore a child in San Diego. The baby was adopted by Juana Machado Wrightington, wife of Thomas Wrightington. By the end of June, the citizens of San Diego learned that the Mormonitos, as they called the soldiers, would soon be going to Los Angeles. The locals petitioned to have Company B either stay or replaced by another Mormon Battalion company. One letter to the local newspaper states, quote, all persons in San Diego are anxious that the Mormons should remain here. They have, by a correct course of conduct, become very popular with the people. and by their industry have taught the inhabitants the value of having an American population among them. And if they are continued, they will be of more value in reconciling the people to the change in government than a host of bayonets. R.B. Mason, Colonel 1st Dragoons commanding, wrote on September 18, 1847, to General R. Jones, the Adjutant General in Washington, D.C. Speaking of the Mormon Battalion as a whole, he wrote, "Of the services of this battalion, of their patience, subordination, and general good conduct, you've already heard. And I take great pleasure in adding that as a body of men, they have religiously respected the rights and feelings of these conquered, and not a syllable of complaint has reached my ears of a single insult offered or outrage done by a Mormon volunteer. So high an opinion did I entertain of the battalion and of her special fitness for the duties now performed by the garrison in this country, that I've made strenuous efforts to engage their services for another year." On the 4th of July in San Diego, the 71st anniversary of America's 71st anniversary of America's birth, 5 cannon and small arms were fired by Company B. Senora Bandini gave a touching speech saying she didn't want the Mormons to leave. She said they could take the American flag hanging in the town square when they left. We don't know if this was the flag that her daughters had sewn. On July 8th, brick masons Philander Colton, Rufus Stoddard, Henry Wilcox, and William Garner finished the house they were building, which was the first brick house in San Diego, which I explained earlier was used as the courthouse and schoolhouse and was placed on the square. While the brick workers took a bath in the ocean after finishing their work, the citizens set out a table in the square and invited all the battalion members to dinner. On Friday, July 9th, goodbyes were said and Company B took up the line of march for Los Angeles. As they left, the citizens clung to them like children. Company B joined their fellows in Los Angeles, where the other battalion companies had constructed Fort Moore and raised the American flag for the first time in American Los Angeles on July 4th, 1847. The battalion was discharged on July 16th, 1 year from the date of their enlistment in Iowa. Most of the discharged soldiers traveled to Salt Lake or back to Iowa to join their families who were still to make the trek to the Salt Lake Valley. The single company sent south to San Diego acted as a largely independent force. Colonel Cook's selection of this unit, Company B, to prevent insurrection in such a strategic location, paid tribute to the reliability of the members. In their book of battalion narratives, Bigler and Bagley state, "In carrying out this duty, the men more than upheld Cook's confidence. His performance in preserving order and earning the respect and friendship of the local citizens stands out as exceptional among the battalion's many achievements." Thank you.